everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Danny.
And I'm 𝐃𝐿𝐵.
And this is our 75th episode.
Happy birthday, Danny. I feel a little less old now that you are a year older.
Yeah, I don't like it this year. I think this is the first year of my life that I had to stop and pause and be like, am I really turning 35? 35? That's 35. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. I just rounded another decade, so I don't have much sympathy for 35, honestly.
It's just weird. Getting older is weird. Because in your mind, you're not actually getting older. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? I'm very curious, but it's just getting older is weird. It feels like high school was just a few years ago, and it's nope, it definitely was 17 years ago. That's almost 20 years ago. High school was almost 20 years ago. What?
Yeah, way to quantify the amount of years that have passed. I feel like I remember vaguely having conversations with the elders in my family. Haha. I'm talking about my cousins as elders. But yeah, just basically how you get to a certain age and you don't want to or don't even remember what year it is, basically.
Well, I also remember, I remember when my mom was 35. I was 15 years old. I'm old enough to have a 15-year-old child. What? And I remember thinking oh, my mom was such an adult and she had all of her shit together. And now I'm oh, you probably didn't know anything, did you? Now I know your secret, woman.
Salty Danny
just
throwing
kidding,
shade.
Mom, if you're listening. It was a good birthday. Well, actually, my birthday fell on a Tuesday, so it wasn't really a great birthday because I just worked all day. But we celebrated on Sunday, which was Valentine's Day, and we had so much fun.
I don't know. I was pretty nervous walking into Sunday because Danny was book another escape room. And I was all right, let's do it. Let's play a game. And we got Danny and my mother-in-law and the three of us together. We'll do it. And then all of a sudden we're on the way there and they're what room did you book? I'm the Roswell incident. It's a room meant for 8 people, but there's only 3 of us. And they're yeah, but what's the solve rate? And I was
what's a solve rate?
Mm-hmm. A solve rate is the percentage of people that have escaped out of the room versus the percentage of people that have not escaped out of the room. Once they started looking through all the rooms, we realized that it was literally the hardest room in the entire game room.
Basically, 𝐃𝐿𝐵 booked us the hardest room that this place had, and the room was intended for up to 8 people, and there were just 3 of us. And the last time we did an escape room, it was just me and 𝐃𝐿𝐵, and the escape room had a 60-something% solve rate, and we did not get out. So I was kind of bummed going into this one because I was well, this has a 40% solve rate. We're not getting out of this one. And I'll be damned, but we got out of it with 11 seconds to spare, and it was so fun. I just love those. I could do them every day. I don't think I would ever get sick of them.
I feel the first time I got in an escape room and started checking out things, it was just more exciting than anything. And now it's becoming super strategic, and it's wow, they're just give me all the puzzles, get me out of this room, get me immersed in the story. It's just a straight on, it's an experience. That's the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, we had a good time. Okay, so what are we talking about today? 𝐃𝐿𝐵's in charge of podcast topics from now on, guys, because I just get really anxious when we have to decide what we're going to talk about, and this task has been taken from my hands, and now it's up to 𝐃𝐿𝐵 what we talk about. So, what are we going to talk about today, 𝐃𝐿𝐵?
And this is exactly how we lose our audience. Today we're talking about body fat. Specifically, does your body fat percentage even matter? I find that this is a question and a conversation that comes up time and time again, and there's a lot that just isn't known about what body fat percentage really is in regards to how relevant is it to your body composition goals. And I find that it's one of those numbers that people get fixated on.
Yes.
And that they also wind up having their judgment skewed on what their body fat percentage is. So to very important things to talk about. But before we start to dig into the details, why does it even matter? Like, how is body fat percentage measured? Like, what is it? Body fat percentage is basically the amount of, after you...
I'm pretty sure people can figure out what body fat percentage is based on its name, 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐞.
You think so?
It's the percentage of your body that is fat. let me save you 5 minutes of 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐞 rambling there.
Podcast over. Done. No, but it's a number that people get hung up on because they think to themselves, well, I want to be lean, and the leaner I want to be, the more body fat percentage I have to lose, which in theory is true, but in actuality, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's a matter of how much muscle you have on your frame. If you get hung up on body fat, you wind up selling yourself short as far as what you can do to create the physique you're looking for. So I think that's definitely something that is worth considering when measuring body fat, for sure.
So I do agree with you that it's a number that people get really, really fixated on. And I feel like that's just like a misplaced focus because, first of all, knowing what your body fat percentage is, and we're going to talk more about that on this podcast, it's really, really hard. Almost no one knows what their body fat percentage actually is. So to get really hung up on the number it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I feel like there's this idea that, especially when you first get into fitness, that lower is better. You just want to see that body fat number go down and down and down and down and down. And the closer you can get to zero, the better off you're going to be. Definitely not the case. Certainly, for many people, getting leaner and lowering your body fat percentage is going to improve your overall health, but only to a point. There's a point of diminishing returns, and then there's a point where your body fat can be so low that it's actually harmful to you, and you have dropped well out of the range of health.
And I think it's also important to consider that there are different body types out there, and genetics plays a role. And although you can change your body composition and body weight set point by how much lean body mass you have on your frame, your starting point is still going to be somewhat different than someone else's. And so to be measuring yourself against someone else, saying, well, this person can sit at this body fat percentage year round, so I should be able to too.
Oh yeah, well to me anyway, that's a whole other topic of comparison and body image, and we actually have an episode planned about that coming up. So I think we could save that part for another day because that's a really long conversation. But the thing that I do like about having a rough idea of body fat percentage, just as a data point or as something to keep in mind, is that it tells us more than just the scale alone. A lot of times, doctors especially will categorize people based on their BMI, their body mass index, which is basically just a height to weight ratio, which can be a helpful number for a lot of the population, but certainly not for everybody. There's a lot of outliers who body mass index is just not helpful for, particularly just right in the middle range, in the normal range, or in the just above normal or the just below normal. I would argue that anybody with a BMI that's super, super low or super, super high, yeah, that BMI is probably pretty telling. But for people in the normal or slightly underweight or slightly overweight BMI range, it does not tell us the whole story. The body fat percentage just gives us another piece of that puzzle. If your BMI is classifying you as overweight, but actually you carry a fair amount of muscle and not much body fat, well, then you could actually be perfectly healthy in that range. Bodybuilders and athletes are some of the people that BMI works for the least. I like body fat percentage for that. Also, you could be at a perfectly healthy, normal, or sometimes even underweight BMI, but have really high body fat percentage levels. This would be somebody, that we colloquially call skinny fat, right? Their weight is totally fine, but their body fat percentage is quite high. And a lot of studies show that people with high body fat percentage levels, even if they're of a healthy weight, they're still at risk for what we otherwise would call obesity-related diseases like heart disease, diabetes. Even if you're a healthy weight, if you carry more body fat than you probably should, which we'll talk about what those numbers are in a little bit, you can still be at risk.
So what I'm getting out of what you're saying is that body fat is a more important measurement system than body mass index.
I think so, but I think that they're both, they're data points that kind of play off of each other, much more so than like one alone could tell you.
The thing that sparked my interest in recording this episode was the fact that we get a little hung up on the number.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's twofold as far as the reasoning goes. I think one is because that number is something that we feel can define our progress. And I feel like we get a little hung up on that. And then the other thing is that we become obsessed with actually measuring it. Like, how can we prove what our body fat is?
Yeah. And giacomo and I have both been in that position where we just needed to know what that number was. And we went through all these different tests. And once you find out what the number, it's really not that big of a deal. And it changes a lot. Like, it changes all the time, especially if you're a bodybuilder that goes through any kind of building or cutting cycle. Like, anyway, let's talk about what the actual healthy ranges are for people, because I cannot tell you the number of people that I have seen post pictures on Facebook and be like, oh, my body fat percentage is at like 6%. And I'm looking at them like, it's actually closer to like probably 15%. But people just don't know. They have no idea what certain body fat percentages look like on people. The vast majority of people underestimate how much body fat they're carrying, and they don't actually know what is possible. There is an amount of body fat that you absolutely have to have in order to be alive. If your body fat drops below this amount, you die. It's called essential body fat. It's called essential because if you don't have it, you die.
And for context and clarity here, that essential body fat is the stuff that is protecting your organs.
Yes.
It's lining your organs so that they stay in place and they can actually still function.
Yes. Now, too much of it, obviously, very dangerous. We talk about the visceral fat around your organs. You don't want too much of it, but you need some of it, or, and I can't emphasize this enough, you die. Essential body fat percentages. What are we talking about?
Essential body fat, for men, you want to have at least 5%.
You don't want to have. You have to have. If your heart is beating, you have at least 5% body fat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to clear this up. We don't want to have 5%. You have, are you listening? If you are listening to this podcast, you have at least 5% body fat, my male friends.
So in
no
other
matter
words,
what Instagram might lead you to believe. Okay.
Sorry.
Moving on. This gets me real riled up.
I have 3% body fat. No, you don't. You're still speaking to me. You have more than 3%. Oh, gosh. And for women, you want to have at least 8% body fat.
Yeah. So, and it's a range, right? Because everybody's body is different. What is essential to one person might not be enough for the next person. So for guys, it's 5 to 10%. Mm-hmm. And for women, it's like 8 to 12. Everybody's different. I've never gotten my body fat percentage below 12. Not ever in my life, just to give you an idea. And then the next couple of ranges, they call them athletic and fitness. Athlete level, fitness level. So I assume all of these two ranges are just, it's a wide range of where your body fat percentage could be and still be considered fit.
Yeah, and fit's all relative. It depends
Totally.
on your sport too, right? Different athletes are at a different place on the scale of what's considered the athletic body fat range.
So for men, what's the range for athletic and fit? So for men, to be in an athlete or a fitness range could be anywhere from 6 to 17% body fat, depending on the person and where they're at. 6 to 17, that's a really wide range, right? And for women, that range is 14 to 24. So I know our audience is more women than men. A lot of women come to me and they want to be, 17 or 18% body fat. That's a really common number that women say to me. I want to be 17 or 18% body fat. You can be up to 24% body fat and still be fit, not just like healthy or normal, fit. 'Tis the nature of what we do. Like, people always aim really high when they're interested in fitness and physique. But also, again, I think a lot of people just don't know what those numbers actually look like.
Right. The same thing for like when it comes to men. I think that the number is
10.
or below.
Yep.
And way before we had an audience and I started getting into fitness a long, long time ago, that number is just, it's been tried and true till the day is long. It's always been 10% or less. And back in the day, I used to believe, well, hell, this is possible, probable, and even a good thing. And nowadays I'm like, yeah, you don't know what it means to be sub 10%, and it actually can do more harm than good if you're even able to get there.
Well, I personally have actually won figure competitions, like women's bodybuilding figure competitions at 16% body fat. I don't think a lot of people, women especially, you know, I can speak to women more than men. I don't think women know what 16, 17, 18% body fat actually looks like on a body. Now, I've been leaner than that and also won competitions, but I think I won my first bodybuilding competition that I ever won at 16% body fat with lines and shadows and probably not any striations, but lots of definition going on at 16%. And I was starving and I was miserable. But again, that's me personally. Other people can live there and it doesn't faze them, right? So what is considered to be just like a normal body fat percentage range?
For men, between 18 to 24%. For women, between 25 to 31%.
Right. So you can be 30% body fat and still be normal. And you can be lower than that. But I mean, if somebody were to be 30% body fat, you're not in dangerous territory. That's what I'm trying to say, is you're not in dangerous territory. You're close. Because if it goes over like 31%, then you are in dangerous territory. And if you're a guy, if it goes over 25%, you are in dangerous territory. So just some things to think about. But what do these numbers actually mean to the regular person? How does somebody even try to go about measuring these numbers?
Well, there are lots of ways to measure. There are machines out there that will give you a readout. And I think that there is some degree of accuracy as far as being able to measure body fat. Even though it's really hard to pin down an exact number, I think you can get to understanding what your body fat range is pretty comfortably with a body fat measuring machine.
Or any mechanism. It doesn't just have to be a machine. There's other ways to measure body fat as well. I mean, skin fold calipers have been around forever.
Yeah.
But every single method of measuring body fat percentage, they all have pros and cons. And they all have margins of error. It's really important to know that. If you want to know what your body fat percentage is, I would say don't get hung up on the number itself because you're never going to know the actual number. But pick a method that works for you and is convenient for you and stick with that. Like if you're going to do a bioimpedance floor scale, for example, don't then 2 weeks later go get a bod pod done and try to compare those two numbers. Because they're not going to relate to one another. They're going to be different. So don't let that get in your head. So pick one method, stick with it, and then another important thing is to measure yourself under the same conditions all the time.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, but in a lot of these instances, and we'll go through them, what you eat or drink, or if you've gone to the bathroom or not, they're going to totally throw the numbers. So they won't be consistent to themselves. So let's talk about them in order, I guess, of easiest to access to hardest to access. I think that's better than trying to go from most accurate to least accurate because, like, we don't know. Sometimes skin fold calipers can be super accurate depending on who's administering it. And sometimes they can be absolutely useless depending on who's administering it. So I think probably the easiest way is circumference measuring. So, like, literally just taking your measurements. You can plug these numbers into a calculator and it'll spit out a body fat percentage number based on your measurements. So some of my clients, sometimes we measure neck circumference with our coaching and people are like, why? It's an important number to determine body fat percentage if you're using this method. Now the number itself, not helpful at all. But you can use those numbers over time to see if you're trending in the direction you want to be trending in. And this is, I say, the easiest and most accessible one because all you need is a tape measure and to be able to like Google, I think it's the Navy formula. It was a formula they used to use in the Navy formula, body fat percentage. And you just use the circumference measurements for that. Again, it's not an accurate number, But if you do it today and then you do it in a month, if the number went up, you probably gained body fat. If it went down, you probably lost body fat. So at least you know if you're trending in the right direction. And that's what all of this is about.
I'd say the next easiest way to measure your body fat is a bioimpedance scale. They have handheld ones, they have ones that you step on, all kinds of ways where you basically get a measurement with an electrical current that goes through your body. Like the metal piece conducts through your system and it's able to tell where it's flowing the most and flowing the least, and it gives you a readout of where your body fat percentage is approximately.
Right. So the way these work, like if you stand on a floor scale that tells you your body fat percentage, it shoots an electric current up through your body and then measures the amount of time it takes for the current to come back down to the scale. And electricity travels at a different rate through body fat, through muscle, through water, and it does some calculation to come up with that number. But you could see how, depending on the amount of fluid in your body at that very moment, you could get a different readout, which is why I say always weigh yourself on one of these scales under the same conditions.
And I'm thinking, depending on whether you're stepping on it or whether you're starting with it above your torso, the handheld ones, that can also throw things off because some people hold more fat in their lower body, some people hold more fat in their upper body, and I'd have to imagine that skews the results somewhat.
I think so too, because we have a handheld one and we have a floor scale, and they both give slightly different readouts.
So then they have those ones where you hold on
and step on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the reason I think that is more accessible than skin fold calipers, the little pinchy things, right? The calipers, you can get a cheap pair of calipers for like $7. But if you don't know how to use it properly, it's useless to you. I would say skin fold calipers are the next one, but you need to either really learn how to administer this correctly on yourself, or you need to be going to a trainer who knows what they're doing, and you need to go to that same person over and over again, because that trainer might do it differently than the next trainer, etc., etc. So I have skin fold calipers and I use them when I'm in prep, but I can only measure a couple of spots because like I can't, measure the skin fold on my back. For example, by myself, I just measure some of the like stomach areas and the thigh area, and that's it. I don't need to get an exact number. If the thickness of the fat there is decreasing, I know my body fat percentage is decreasing. That's all I really need to know. You have to practice a lot to get good at using them. And you have to make sure you're always measuring in the same spot, under the same conditions, like everything else here.
And also the quality of the calipers matters as well.
I've never had a fancy pair of calipers. I only have the like really cheap plastic ones. And that one works for me with a lot of practice, but I would be curious to try one of those fancy pants ones.
Yeah.
But they can get expensive, like up in the hundreds of dollars. So I don't have that one. The next most accessible, I would say, is probably the Bod Pod. I've never done the Bod Pod. Have you?
No.
But I know a lot of gyms have them. Like a lot of 24-hour fitnesses have access to a Bod Pod for their clientele. I've just never seen one like in person. But essentially you go, this is my understanding, and again, I've not done it, take this with a grain of salt. You go sit in what looks like a little pod. It weighs you and then measures the amount of air that you displace. And it gives you a number based on that. Again, because muscle has a different density than fat. So depending on how much space you take up and how much you weigh, it theoretically should be able to give you a body fat percentage. And fairly accessible, although it's probably anywhere from $30 to $50 every time you want to get it done. So not super cheap. Along a similar vein, so it's the same premise, but in my opinion, much more complicated to actually do, is the hydrostatic weighing, which is literally underwater weighing. And
Sorry.
Giacomo and I have had this done, and holy crap. One, there's almost nowhere you can get this done.
It's ridiculous.
We did it at UNH, University of New Hampshire, in their like sports medicine school.
Did it once back in Portland too, if I recall.
You did, I didn't.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was really weird to get it done at a college because it was just all these college students just like poking and prodding at you in your underwear, basically. But think of, how can I explain this?
Dunk tank?
A dunk tank, yes, but it goes into the floor and you sit in this weird metal chair and they lower you into the water, and then right before you go under, you have to blow all the air out of your lungs, and then they put you all the way under, and that chair you're in is a scale, and it is, man.
It's intense.
It's really intense. It's hard to, one, blow all the air out of your lungs and then go underwater and hold it, and then hold so still that the scale gets an accurate readout of you. Mm-hmm. And then you come out and you're soaking wet. It's just...
They're watching for the bubbles, so there's no more bubbles on top to make sure you really can't breathe anymore. And it's just really weird.
Very inconvenient, I would say. Allegedly fairly accurate, although after having it done by a bunch of college students, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's probably a level of expertise that needs to be acquired in order to do this correctly as well, because quite frankly, that was a shit show, and we paid a lot for it, just to experience it.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd recommend hydrostatic weighing unless you just wanted to do it for fun.
Which was basically what we did.
Yeah, pretty much. And then finally, the DEXA scan, which is an X-ray scan of your body. It's, I would say, the priciest of all of them.
Yep.
The hardest to find out of all of them because there are some state laws around having access to them for body fat measuring, because they're actually used by hospitals to measure bone density, which they are fairly accurate at. And I also feel like because you're getting an X-ray of your body, that you can really get a sense of where your body fat is, like how much visceral fat you have. Again, I think it's probably one of the most accurate out of all of them, but there are still the margin of error basically is there for all of the same reasons that the margin of error is there for every other one of these tests. How much food is left in your stomach, that you're still digesting, how much water is in your system, what time of day are you measuring. Like you can't control all of these variables. And here's the one thing that I've just been itching to say about all of these is that every single one of these scales of measuring body fat are based on the premise that we know how much your bones weigh. They're based on a model which predicts how much your bones weigh. And I like saying it's a little graphic, but it's true. Unless you could literally take all the bones out of your body, pull them, and plop them on a scale, weigh them, and then put them back in your body to know how much your bones weigh, there's literally no way to tell exactly how much your bones weigh, so you can't plug that into a formula accurately. It's guesswork. It's
well, except for the DEXA, that's literally what it's doing. It, like you just said, it's to measure bone density, to see how much your skeleton weighs, to check for osteoporosis, particularly in elderly populations. So in Massachusetts, I think there's only one place in all of Massachusetts you can get this done because of the laws to test body fat. There's lots of hospitals that have DEXA scans, but you can't even pay out of pocket to go have this done to measure your body fat percentage. There's one place in Massachusetts that has a license to do it. It is something like $150 to $200 to get it done in Massachusetts. And then one day we flew out to California for an event we were at, and there was a place, apparently they're everywhere in California. We got it done for like $50 each just to see what it was like. And it's super convenient. You don't even have to take your clothes off. You literally just lie on a table and sit still for 5 minutes while this thing scans over you. And it also shows you a picture of where all of that body fat is. And you ever, you know when you sit down in a chair and you look down and your thighs have just spread out to be like twice the size they are when you're standing? Okay, so a DEXA scan gives you a picture that looks like that, but your whole body, because you just lied down on a flat table and everything is spread out. So when you get the picture, it really freaks you out because everybody kind of looks like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
You look like you're flattened, basically.
Yeah, it's alarming to see that. DEXA is, at least at this point, it's kind of the gold standard. It's got the lowest margin of error, being something like between 2 to 3.5% is the margin of error. That's my Boston in me. The margin of error in the DEXA scan, 2 to 3.5%, and that's the lowest.
And I still think it's a little more than that based on measuring and remeasuring and what the variables are. I mean, what if I drank a gallon of water before I went, for example?
Well, that's why they tell you not to do that. I'm just saying. Again, don't be a dope. Do these all under the same conditions.
Right.
It's super expensive. It's really pricey. And at the end of the day, like, is it kind of cool to have it done? Yeah, it's kind of cool to have it done. Also because it, as opposed to other ways of measuring, it also tells you what your visceral fat is versus your like subcutaneous fat, which I think is interesting. It's, you can be very thin and still have a lot of visceral fat around your organs, like a dangerous amount, or you can be bigger and have less visceral fat. It's just interesting. It's just super interesting to me. And I feel that way about all of these. I think they're really interesting. I would really recommend don't get married to any of these and be like, oh, that is my number. I now know my number, because you probably don't.
The other thing I think about is when someone's in a depletion phase and their glycogen stores are just shot. If they're not balanced out and they're going to measure body fat, is that number really accurate as far as where they're at?
I mean, it should be, because your glycogen stores shouldn't have a whole lot to do with your body fat. It depends on the method, I guess, but like if you were doing calipers, for example, it doesn't matter what your glycogen stores are, your fat is still going to be your fat. Glycogen is stored in the muscle and the liver and the blood, for that matter, but not in the fat. But that's the thing, like we could talk about all of these little technicalities with all of these different methods all day, which is why I get real bummed out when I see people that are just like obsessed with that number and watching that number and if it's going up or down. And the number one way that number is going to be skewed is water. That's the number one way that most of these numbers are going to get skewed, is how much water is in your body. And the amount of water in our body changes constantly, like hour to hour. And if you're a female and your hormones fluctuate over the course of a month, that is going to impact the amount of water in your body. So even if you're doing everything under the same conditions, the hormones in your body might be slightly different, kind of throwing that number a bit as well.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I get apprehensive about when suggesting to measure your body fat and use it as a super relevant data set point is that I find that people wind up becoming so hyper-focused on it, they wind up trying to control the variables without even realizing it, right? I need to have a bowel elimination, and I need to have X amount of water balance in my system. It's like, do you really need to have control over all those variables to get that accurate data on yourself when it comes to measuring your body fat? I don't think so.
I understand why people do that, because I always want to measure under this as close to the same conditions as possible, especially if my goal at that moment is particularly serious. Like when I'm on prep, I do exactly what you just said. I'm not even going to stand on the scale unless all of the conditions are being met, because that number is not helpful to me otherwise. But if it's like the off season, no, I don't care. If it's the off season, I'm really not that concerned with my body fat percentage in the first place. I'll kind of watch it on our floor scale just as here's how we're doing. And, I'll stay in the range that I normally stay in, which in the off season for me is anywhere from like on the floor scale again. So we take it with a grain of salt. And I'll say this, depending on what we have a new floor scale. We're going to talk about it later. But the floor scale that I've had for years, you can set it to like regular person or athlete. Have you ever played with that?
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I never realized this, but if I change the setting from regular person to athlete, it drops my body fat percentage like by 5%. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, I'm the same person standing on the scale. Like, I could stand on it as a quote regular person and it could say like 23%, and then I could hit athlete and stand on it and it'll be like 18%, and I'm like, wow, look how easy it was to lose 5% body fat. I just had to click that button right there.
Maybe it has something to do with the formula that it plugs it into.
I'm sure. What is that formula? Why have they not explained this to me so I could better decide which category I fall into? Anyway, so I just keep it set at regular person because I feel like that's probably more accurate. And I would say, like, for me, somewhere around 22% up or down, give or take. That's where I spend the most part of my off season, and my body's happy there. My hormones are healthy, my hair is healthy, my skin is healthy, my sleep is good. That's where my body is happy to just like live its happy life, going to the gym and being active and having brain power to do my job and strong enough to hit PRs in the gym. And anything 18% or under, all of that just starts to, for me, drop off. What about you? Where are your like happy living numbers?
Well, my happy living numbers, where my body is comfortable at, is usually around 12 to 14%. Any lower than 12%, and there's some drop off as far as feeling good, being productive, being a fully functioning human. 12 to 14%, I'm pretty comfortable at. That being said, I'm not setting PRs, I'm not performing well. etc., etc. There's a little bit of food focus there, but like I'm mostly comfortable. I try really hard to live between 14 to 18% because that's where it's optimal for me as an athlete, as a bodybuilder in the improvement season, to really continue to be able to change my physique. Anywhere outside of that range, on the upper end of that range, and it starts to get really uncomfortable for me. Like I'm not comfortable living there anymore, and it starts to become counterproductive. It's like overfeeding essentially for the sake of it. And anywhere below 14%, it's getting to the point where I'm comfortable settling there, but my body's not really going to change all too much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
One important thing that I feel like we haven't mentioned, which I find is probably a real good takeaway on this entire conversation, is eyeballing your body fat measurement, which is what we do the majority of the time, or at least it's what I do. I eyeball body fat measurements all the time for clients.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As well as for myself. And I find that the more experience you get learning all this stuff through different ways of measuring it and understanding what it is, that you can become an expert at having a trained eye, even on yourself, knowing what your body fat measurement is, especially within a range, which is honestly what I feel is more important than anything.
Yes.
Knowing your range.
We have this thing where people can purchase a one-time macro calculation, where it's like they literally just purchase a one-time thing, they fill out a questionnaire and submit pictures, and then I will calculate their macros based on that. Yes, I have their measurements, and I certainly could plug that into like the Navy formula, but with the pictures at this point, I don't have to. I can just look, as long as the pictures are decent, I can look at them, and within a 5% range, which is fine, I can determine roughly where someone's body fat percentage is just by looking at them. But part of that is because I see so many bodies all the time. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and she was like, "Do you ever think it's like weird that people send you pictures in their underwear?" And I was like, "No, actually, I only remember that it's weird if I'm talking to somebody else about it." And they're like, "Wow, that's weird." And I'm like, "Is it weird though?" But I see pictures of people's bodies all the time, like all the time. Not the Instagram posed with perfect lighting pictures. I'm talking people in their underwear, standing straight on, first thing in the morning, pictures. And you get very good at figuring out roughly what someone's body fat percentage is. Now, if the person you're looking at is you in the mirror every day, you can get pretty good at estimating that too. Body dysmorphia notwithstanding, to be continued at another episode about body dysmorphia. That's part of why it can be good to have somebody else checking. Anyway, again, different topic.
And one other helpful tip when you're starting to get into taking a look at eyeballing your body fat to know what range you're in is that sometimes the visuals that you Google can be a little bit deceiving based on body proportions.
Yeah. So there's a chart in my book, actually, you can pick, this is what these body fat percentages look like. And it's helpful. It's a really helpful guide. When I was finding that image to use in the book, I found a lot of other images that, one, I did not agree with. I didn't think they were accurate at all. For one, even though this image that I ended up going with is really good, it's still what 15% body fat looks like on this one woman who's that tall with those proportions, and you might not have those proportions. Maybe you store more body fat just in your butt or your hips, or maybe you don't store any body fat in your arms and legs, but it all goes to your belly. It's going to be different for everybody.
Right.
So even if you're using those guides, you have to be very realistic about what your body type is.
Yeah, and they're gendered, I guess, because there's got to be some sort of metric there to look at. Some men, like myself, for example, I hold a lot more body fat in my lower body than the
average man.
And they're using the average man as for a model, as an example. So take the information with a grain of salt, but also know what your body fat storage patterns look like from head to toe when you're measuring, instead of looking at the image and being like, okay, comparing yourself to that. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting because 𝐬𝐲𝐭 stores more of his body fat in his lower body, which is different than the quote unquote average man. I store more body fat in like my limbs and like not a lot in my torso, which is different than the quote unquote average woman. Like, what is an average man? What is an average woman? It's so hard to generalize these things. So the final takeaway here is Does your body fat percentage matter? It does. It does matter in terms of your overall health and your goals, but it's really important to learn what is a realistic body fat percentage for what you're shooting for. What does that look like? How does it actually feel on your body? And at the end of the day, trying to pin down exactly what your number is, it's very, very challenging to do. So rather than try to figure out exactly what your body fat percentage is right now, pick one of the methods that we talked about today, stick with that method, measure under similar conditions as much as possible, and just use that as a guide to determine whether you're moving in the right direction or not.
Moving on to our product and review part of the podcast today. We haven't done a product review in a while, actually. So I'm pretty excited about this.
How do you guys feel about the product reviews? Do you want us to bring those back more frequently, or do you just want us to save them for when we have something special to talk about like today? Let us know.
And if you have a product that you want us to review, email us at veganproteins@gmail.com and let us know what product you might want us to review, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll start doing them again. We just got a new scale, actually, and I've been playing around with it for the past 2 weeks. I haven't even gotten a chance to explore all the bells and whistles on the 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐠 scale. I am enjoying it. I haven't gotten a new scale in a while. It's been years, actually. And normally I just honestly check out my body weight and I record it somewhere in a spreadsheet. Pretty old school, I know. This particular scale records everything on an app, which I find to be really helpful. I have a graph of my measurements, not just my body weight, but you also have a whole bunch of other data to go off of. So this is a bioimpedance scale, by the way. So it's the thing where it's measuring your electrical current and the time it takes to go up and down through your body. And with that, you're getting your body mass index, body fat percentage, a breakdown of your body weight in terms of skeletal muscle, lean body mass, etc., and a whole bunch of other really interesting information that honestly I have not gotten the chance to really delve into yet because I've only started measuring with the scale for the past 2 weeks, but so far so good. I like it. I open up my phone, I have my profile, and Danny, you can create a profile on this scale as well.
And I will be once I get it out of the office you've been hiding it in since you got it.
Yeah, I've been kind of hoarding the scale in the office of my own, playing around with it. But yeah, anyway, so you can have multiple profiles, and once you're synced to the app, it's super simple to upload the data. It happens automatically. You just open up the app, and as you weigh in, within a minute after you step off the scale, your information is recorded and you're good to go. So yeah, and I think the price point is pretty reasonable on this one as well. These scales, from what I remember, they were just so pricey that it was hard for me to justify spending several $100s on a scale. The 𝐟𝐿, they have different ones, but this one, I believe you could find it for like around $50, give or take. So it's well worth it, and so far so good. I'm enjoying it. And if you're interested in checking out 𝐟𝐿 scales, I'll leave a link below in the show notes where you can find one that works for you and pick it up.
And this is not a sponsored podcast. They sent us this scale to test it out and said if we liked it and we wanted to talk about it, we could. All right, moving on to our question and answer segment of the day. This question comes from Facebook. Is there any reason I should want to get good at conventional deadlifting versus sumo deadlifting?
I think it's helpful to try both of them because different body types honestly are just suited towards one versus the other. And I think in general, it's just helpful to become more familiar with different movement patterns. So I would recommend playing around with both. You'll find that you're naturally stronger on one versus the other. And although each style has different benefits, as far as like a conventional deadlift will train a little more of your low back and upper posterior chain, whereas a sumo deadlift will train a little more of your glutes, ham/lower posterior chain. Both are going to really strengthen up your posterior chain. So honestly, my thought process here, my opinion is to do them both for a little while and find out which one you're stronger at and find out which one feels better and then stick with that one the majority of the time, rather than trying to have a preference on one versus the other as far as wanting to train your body in a certain way or just, being focused on that movement in particular. Experiment with both, find out which one feels better because they're both going to train your posterior chain, upper and lower. This question's for you, Danny. What does a vegan bodybuilder grocery list consist of?
Wow, that's a big one. A vegan bodybuilding grocery list. It's going to be different for everybody, I think, depending on what you like and what you don't like. And I think that's the most important thing, is just because you've decided to take up bodybuilding or you've decided to go vegan doesn't mean that you have to eat foods you don't like. You have to make sure you enjoy the foods that you're eating. But I'll give you some ideas of some staple foods that I think should be on most people's grocery list. But again, if you hate anything on this list, you don't have to have it. Vegetables. Number one, make sure you're getting plenty of leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, root vegetables, lots of fruits, lots of color in your produce is going to be the most important thing, and the thing that I think a lot of bodybuilders, especially bodybuilders who are not vegan, I think they overlook this. I don't think they give this the credit that it deserves. Now, that should be a large part of your diet, but it's not going to make up a lot of the calories that you're eating. Where do the bulk of the calories come from? Things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, quinoa, beans, all kinds of beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, pinto beans, edamame, soybeans, oats. Oatmeal is a great one. You could do some whole grain breads if you enjoy that, or even whole grain flour to make whole grain breads. Those are going to be big ones. For like fat sources, I would say things like avocados, nuts and seeds. So chia seeds, flax seeds, sesame seeds, all kinds of nuts, almonds, walnuts, nut butters, almond butter, peanut butter. For protein sources, which is the biggest difference between vegan and non-vegan bodybuilding lists, this is where, you tend to find people have the most controversial mindsets around it. If I say tofu, someone's gonna be like, tofu's terrible for you, which, I wholeheartedly disagree with. So I'll just give you the ones that we like. Tofu, tempeh, seitan, vital wheat gluten, so you can make your own seitan or make your own protein foods like my protein bagels or protein pancakes. Some of the mock meats that are out there, they're all different. They all have different macros. Check out the macros, check out the ingredients, make sure you're cool with them. But I like things like field roast, tofurkey. I'm a big fan of tofurkey. Morningstar Farm chicken strips are my absolute favorite. I eat them every day and get made fun of for it on a regular basis. Let's see, any major food groups that I missed here? Oh, and then there's also the little extras like soy milk or non-dairy milk, whatever kind of non-dairy milk you enjoy, nutritional yeast, lots of spices, because again, you want to make sure that your food tastes good. I think those are the big staples.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. Please stay in touch with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, our Facebook group, Muscles by Brussels Radio, on all social media channels at Vegan Proteins and at Muscles by Brussels. Also, feel free to leave us a review on your favorite podcast catcher. It helps us reach more people and get the message out there. Once again, my name's 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿.
And I'm Danny.
And we'll talk to you soon.